I gaze into the doorway of temptation's angry flame, and every time I pass that way, I always hear my name. Then onward in my journey, I come to understand that every hair is numbered like every grain of sand. I've gone from rags to riches in the sorrow of the night, in the violence of a summer's dream, in the chill of a wintry light, in the bitter dance of loneliness fading into space, in the broken mirror of innocence on each forgotten face. I hear the ancient footsteps like the motion of the sea. Sometimes I turn, there's someone there, at times it's only me. I'm hanging in the balance of the reality of man, like every sparrow falling, like every grain of sand.
Fantastic. So tell me why you've chosen Every Grain of Sand.
I've chosen Every Grain of Sand because I feel that it... Okay, so the first time I was aware of this song was when I was reading an article that I've actually pulled up here, just so that I don't misquote the specific details of it. It was written by the Observer journalist Sean O'Hagan and published on the 25th of March 2001. And it was, the headline is, Well, How Does It Feel? And it was an article that was written to coincide with him being on the verge of winning an Oscar for Things Have Changed from Wonder Boys. And it was in the kind of real... I was in the midst of my Bob Dylan obsession. Like the start of my Bob Dylan obsession. And so that I genuinely would urge everybody to go and seek it out. It's still available on the Guardian's website.
How old were you then, by the way?
16. 15. So I was not yet 16.
So I was kind of, about 17 when I got into Dylan. So it's similar sort of time.
I always urge people to go and read it, because even though it's now 24 years out of date in terms of his career, but I think it's just a brilliant piece of writing that gets Dylan in a way that lots of things written about Bob Dylan, I think, don't get Bob Dylan.
I'll put the link in the episode notes.
Yeah, it's a really, really terrific piece of music writing and terrific piece of writing about Dylan. And so the first time I encountered the name of the song was on Shot of Love, he sang Every Grain of Sand, a secular song that for me stands head and shoulders in its craft and spare poetry above many of the inflated symbolist outpourings like Desolation Row, which always seem bafflingly to precipitate those weary old "is Dylan better than Keats" debates that surface from the bowels of academia every so often. And so that was the first time I came across this, and it traces an arc of Dylan's career up to 2001. And so I then was sort of, I didn't go out and get Shot of Love. I went back and looked at the bootleg series box set that I'd got. And for me, the definitive recording of Every Grain of Sand is not the album version, which is sort of, the album version is good and is, it's nice. It sounds a bit like Everybody Hurts. Like it's like a sort of, the guitar line is sort of imitating those like Steve Cropper, Otis Redding, Stax soul ballads, which is the sort of conscious thing that R.E.M. were thinking about when they were recording Everybody Hurts. And it always reminds me of the start of that. And it's not bad. It's very Dylan in the 80s. It's got that like sort of echoey drum. But for me, the definitive version of it is the... I guess maybe the demo.
I was going to say
that's basically, it's incredible. Piano, guitar.
With, I think, we were talking about nylon string guitars. It's a nylon string guitar.
It's a lovely sound.
It's
it actually suits the song to be more, for the arrangement to be more austere. And so I listened to it there and thought it was incredible. And I always talked about Every Grain of Sand because to me, it's interesting on a number of levels. It's interesting because it emerges in the middle of his Christian period, which is, not his most loved period. By I would say some distance. You'll find apologists for every Dylan phase, apart from maybe the Christian period. And there's this sense that between maybe people like bits of Slow Train Coming, and there's some interesting stuff on Slow Train Coming, but certainly after Slow Train Coming and before Oh Mercy, there's no...
Yeah.
It's not saved. There's not a lot that people will rush to defend, which is why Girl from the North Country, the musical that they based Dylan songs out of, is so interesting because it pulls heavily from that period and rearranges a lot of the songs. And the version of Tight Connection that Sheila Atim sings on that soundtrack, oh my God, it's so much better than the recorded version. It totally changes the song. But so I like the idea that they're in the middle of this creative nadir. He writes something that I think stands comfortably with his best work. And those of us who were Every Grain of Sand fans, and there were a lot in the kind of wider Dylan community, I feel have been vindicated in the kind of elevation of Every Grain of Sand to a kind of classic Dylan song. to such an extent that when I saw him at the Palladium a couple of years ago, he closed the show on Every Grain of Sand.
Yeah.
And it was, I felt very vindicated.
I love this album because it's the final one of his 3 kind of, Christian albums. But it sort of feels like Bob Dylan is human again, in a way, in terms of I love parts of Slow Train Coming. It's a great blues album. Musically, there's great moments. But this is a deeply vulnerable song.
Yeah.
A really human song in the midst of a period that it was kind of the first time Dylan was ever saying there's black and there's white, there's the damned and there's the saved.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about it. It's a really interesting choice.
I have to say I missed Every Grain of Sand when it first came out because I stopped listening to Dylan when Slow Train Coming came out.
Yeah.
I was so upset and kind of offended. Now I've gone back to it and I really dig it as an album. But so I missed Saved and I missed Shot of Love. And it was only when I heard this on the bootleg, when I heard the demo, and I thought, Jesus, that's a good song.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I did get back and listen to the Christian albums, but he certainly lost me during that period. And I do think that demo, I find it so moving. I'm not. There's certain Dylan songs that move me, but only very few of them, like that really make me want to, really get me in my heart. And when I have to say that when the dog barks in the demo, I want to burst out crying. There's something about it. It's like animal. Sometimes my cat will just make me laugh like a not sometimes, every day. Every day the cat makes me laugh. And it takes me out of myself. And the dog somehow makes you go deeper into the song.
We've spoken a lot about how even when Dylan's being vulnerable in songs like most of the time, or Boots of Spanish Leather, it's hidden under this kind of slightly sardonic or slightly he's putting up a front. It's almost like God is the only person he won't put up a front with. And that's what this song speaks to me as. And I love that one of the things about the demo version is that it's in a different key and he's singing in a higher register. So it's almost like not only the lyrics
sounds a bit strange.
He sounds vulnerable though, doesn't he? And he's done that on purpose.
That's the trick that the producer of Heard It Through the Grapevine pulled. Do you know that? Heard It Through the Grapevine is slightly out of Marvin Gaye's register. So he's constantly, when you listen back to it, you realise he's straining to hit every note, but it creates that sense of, it makes him sound upset. Like it makes him sound more upset than if he was singing it in his actual register. But I think it's full of of these kind of Old Testament, like Cain, I now behold this chain of events that I must break. It's full of this kind of, it's got this sort of vengeful Old Testament God, coursing through it. He doesn't sound, he's, to me, it sounds like a man experiencing a crisis of faith, who's continually returning, who's trying to reassure himself that everything is numbered like every grain of sand. Like it's somebody who's experiencing doubt and trying to reassure themselves more than it is an expression of religious devotion. That's the way that I've always, that's the way I've always read the song, because we're listening to him in the time of his confession, in the hour of his deepest need. This is a man sort of in some kind of existential crisis who keeps trying to reassure himself there is a plan, God has a plan, but he can't maintain that certainty. And, so he is, gazing into the doorway of temptation's angry flame. Like it's a guy in crisis and trying to remind himself that he believes in a God that has a plan for him, but it feels fragile. And it doesn't feel confident in its assertion.
It's not that you've either got faith or you've got unbelief and there is no neutral ground.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it really is like
Christian album.
It also strikes me, it sounds a bit like a lullaby to me. Like I remember the first time I heard it, I found it, like the first time I hear any Dylan song, except for the really simple ones on Nashville Skyline or whatever, I just get a kind of a feeling about them. Like I can't quite grasp the words. They sort of flow over me, but I kind of get the feeling.
Yeah.
And the feeling I got with this was some comfort. When you look at the words, they're not comforting at all.
They're not comforting at all. No. He's trying to comfort himself the whole time. I mean, he's literally saying that he's hanging in the balance of the reality of man. Like this is a guy, like he almost sounds suicidal. Like it almost sounds like a guy considering oblivion or the reassurance of his faith.
Yeah.
Well, and because the whole thing is like a line like in the violence of a summer's dream. Like a summer's dream is like, what a nice dream. And it's the summer. But it's like the violence of it, in the bitter dance of loneliness.
Yeah.
Fading into space. It's like, oh my God, that's oblivion. It's bitter oblivion. It's awful. It's like the worst. Did you ever hear the Robert McKee screenwriting course? This thing that years ago John Cleese famously did before.
Right. Yeah.
And it was always about how to write a Hollywood film.
That's not adaptation, is it?
Robert
film
McKee is the guy,
he's
in,
the guy
adaptation.
in adaptation. Yeah.
If you fucking think it,
that's it.
it's Brian Cox.
Yeah, it's Brian Cox.
Well, I actually went.
That makes sense.
I actually went and I attended one of those. Not that I wanted to write a screenplay, but it was just so famous and
of course.
And so I went to. It's a weekend, and he's like Brian Cox played him.
Right,
Like he takes no prisoners, and he will. At one point, he started talking about vivisection. I don't know, like he's done so many of them, and he was defending vivisection. Like this woman was saying, "How can you defend vivisection?" He said, "If you think vivisection isn't an important thing, get out of my fucking, I don't want to see you fucking." But anyway, Robert McKee, I mean, he'd done so many of them at that time. I think he was trying to sort of mix it up.
Yeah.
But one of the things that the major things he has, and this, will save you £500, is a thing called the negation of the negation, which is his phrase for what happens really in every Hollywood movie. It's like think of the worst thing that you could think of, and then 100 times worse than that.
Yeah.
And that will be the hero's dilemma.
Right, yeah.
In any Tom Cruise, not Tom Cruise, because he doesn't have to sort of, well, probably in his action films. I don't know anything about Tom Cruise films really, but in a dramatic film, it'll be like think of the worst thing that can happen, and then make it 100 times worse. And to me, I'm sorry that was a long way of saying, the bitter dance of loneliness fading into space.
Yeah.
To me it's not just a bitter dance, and it's not just loneliness, but it's fading into space. And the broken mirror of innocence on each forgotten
lines.
face.
Yeah, the broken mirror of innocence.
Because that's Dylan for the first time in a few albums, sort of having empathy with his fellow man rather than you're damned or you're saved.
Yeah.
The broken mirror of innocence. There is innocence there, but it's broken because of the human condition. It speaks to the human condition.
But see, then it's at each forgotten face. Like I can't even remember these people.
Yeah.
Which I find like a negation of the negation. It's like you take them, you feel pity and empathy for them, and then you forget them.
Also, it's a dangerous game to sort of play guesswork on how much of this is autobiographical or not. But there's no he's not drowning us in illusion. Like there's references to the Bible, but they're part of the actual text of the song. But it's difficult to not read autobiographically into Dylan in his 40s, feeling creatively washed up, divorce behind him. And also the line, "I've gone from rags to riches in the sorrow of the night." Like, there's an element to this of like, are you writing about yourself? Are you having a crisis of faith in God and your talent and, the way you're like conducting yourself? I mean, the Doorway of Temptation's angry frame is like, it's like it all feels very, mournful. And it all feels very personal. And again, it's always dangerous to read too much into this, especially with like how much Dylan is putting of his autobiography into any of his songs. But this one feels very near the knuckle. And now I think this album came out in 1981.
81.
Is that right? Yeah, 81.
Yeah.
So I feel like in some ways I've gone through this thing where I love. So I turned 40 this year. So now now I'm in my every grain of sand. I'm in my every grain of sand.
I'm looking forward to your Empire Burlesque, Nish, whatever that is.
So let's talk about the flowers of indulgence and the weeds of yesteryear.
It is a horrible game playing what was Dylan doing. I'm 31 now. It's a dreadful
game. You can't do that. No, because you can't do that because of the back cover of the 67 Greatest Hits. Because that just has... He was he had just turned 25 when Blonde on Blonde was released.
Yeah.
So you can't do that with Dylan.
No, it's
You
a
can't.
dangerous
Of
game.
all people, he's the one you absolutely cannot do that with, because by 25 he'd essentially retired. If he had not made another song after 1966, he'd still be as
legend.
famous.
Yeah. You're so
he would
right.
pretty much still be as famous as he is now. But the thing that's interesting about these songs is that his craft changed. Like he's a writer, and so the rock star period of any artist's life can only exist for your 20s, really. But the people that keep going, their craft improves and they become capable. He couldn't write this song at 24. This song he could not have written.
No,
This is not the song. Blood on the Tracks is not a man in his 20s. Obviously Time Out of Mind and the albums that concern themselves with mortality, he could not have written those in his 20s. So one of the things that I like about his long career is that you actually see him change and in some ways get better, or certainly be capable of writing in more complicated and nuanced ways. I think there's so much of that, there's so much of this that is a guy in his 40s. Like, there's so much of this song that feels like somebody that's had a bit of life behind them. The weeds of yesteryear. You have to have a few yesteryears in order to have had them spring weeds.
Well, it's sort of what I love as a Dylan fan is, to me, 97 onwards feels like a totally different Dylan. I know it's the same man, but it's a really good point. He couldn't have written those songs in the 60s. I bet, that 2004 interview is like, I can't write those anymore. I can do other things.
Yeah,
well,
you can do other
the
things,
other things are just as interesting in different ways.
Yeah, when you think of, say, Mr. Tambourine Man, which I think, clearly
It's like a fever dream, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can't, through the foggy ruins of time.
Yeah.
And again, he was 23 or something.
Yeah.
But you couldn't touch Dylan. It's like he was so amorphous, he was so surreal.
Yeah.
Whereas this is kind of very,
this is
kind of solid.
It feels very human.
Yeah.
Very human.
Incredibly human.
And, as you said, he couldn't have written it. And every hair is numbered.
Yeah.
I mean, I come up with a insane theory for each episode. And this is my theory for this one.
Okay.
Don't look at my notes.
Yeah.
It's about, in this song, how Dylan quotes, we know he quotes the Bible.
Yeah.
But he also, I believe, quotes Shakespeare, or Hamlet in particular.
Okay.
So, first of all, in my research of this one, Jesus says in the Bible, this is from the Bible, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care."
Right.
So that is
Sparrow
from
falling.
Sparrow falling.
Like every sparrow falling. But again, doing a deeper dive, and this one blew my mind. In Israel, you could buy 2 sparrows for a penny during Jesus' time.
Wow.
The poor people, ate sparrows.
Oh my God.
And they would sell dead sparrows.
Wow.
Yeah. I found that really weird. And then, of course, in Hamlet, when he's dying, his final speeches, there's a special providence in the fall of a sparrow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I think he's quoting the Bible.
Right, yeah.
But then he says, and this is the thing, the line in the "I'm hanging in the balance" that comes from the Dylan song.
Yeah.
This is Hamlet. "If it be not now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now." So he's talking about his own death,
Yeah.
Mortality.
immortality. And Dylan says, "I am hanging in the balance."
Yeah.
Of the reality of man, like every sparrow falling.
Yeah, right.
Like every grain of sand. So there's my
you are.
Shakespeare Bible Bob
Listen,
Dylan.
with him, we know he's reading all this stuff because it all churns back up in his work. But the interesting thing with this song is it's not Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot are fighting in the Captain's Tower. It's not like front loading it with references and allusions. It's the language is subtly referencing the Bible and Shakespeare, and I think William Blake as well. I think William Blake has a phrase.
I've got from the Auguries of Innocence by William Blake. So to see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So you can see, but the great thing about it is he stripped a lot of the. You don't need to have that reading to get the sense of the song. Like it feels like. There's not that many songs about existential crises. It's not generally fodder. I mean, like "Help" by the Beatles is one. There's not many songs that kind of capture that sort of sense of an existential crisis. And this, some of Kendrick Lamar's, like, you know, "To Pimp a Butterfly" onwards songs have. There's been like things like "Feel" from Damn have a sense of an existential crisis brewing, but this really feels like somebody who's in a kind of in a state of total depression and despair, and is trying to reassure himself that God has a plan for him, but he doesn't sound fully. The narrator does not sound themselves fully convinced of their own faith, and I just think it's a stunning piece of writing. You know. Outside of, he considers himself a songwriter. Sometimes when you get too bogged down in Dylan the poet, you take away some of the actual fun of the fact that he is, also a rock star. But this is a really incredible just piece of writing. Like as an assembly of words, that's a good one.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to talk about is him within this song as a musician as well, because it shows, the reason he uses music as his vehicle. So it's almost like an Act 3 structure repeating in this song. So if you, in the time of my confession, that doom, that arpeggio thing, that's Act 1. That's to establish the character and the setting. And then it's don't have the inclination as it rises. That's kind of the rise of hope in Act 2 and all that. And then a lesser songwriter like myself would go, okay, let's flash into something totally different and take it on a thing. Yeah. He goes back to the thing. It's like, we're in the same place, but I've got hope. I can kind of hold on to my faith, or I'm trying to hold on to my faith.
Yeah.
It's
amazing, and I really like the fact that it's now it's sort of risen up the pantheon. I think in the Rolling Stone list of the top 100 Dylan songs, I think it was 10, or it's certainly in the top 10, and it's risen up the pantheon of the kind of Dylan songs, and also to me it's a sort of evidence of his greatness that in what we consider as Dylan fans to be the nadir of his career, he's still writing. I mean, anyone would have been proud of that. That would be any songwriter's top 10 song would feature this. It's that, and this is in the midst of his most lost phase.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. The beginning of that Sean O'Hagan, I really must insist everyone goes and reads that, just because I do think it's a great piece of writing. But when you were talking about him in the 60s, it reminded me of the first paragraph of this. So the first paragraph of this article is, it's not a question of breaking the rules, don't you understand? The 25-year-old amphetamine-fueled, stick-thin, impossibly cool Bob Dylan told his biographer Robert Shelton in 1966, I don't break rules because I don't see any rules to break. As far as I'm concerned, there aren't any rules. As a statement of intent, it was suitably fearless, consummately self-confident, and, as pop history would prove, utterly self-fulfilling. He was also Dylan willing himself into pop history as the first avatar of a new kind of cool, the first truly modern pop icon, standing unchallenged at the epicenter of a seismic pop cultural shift, the reverberations of which are still being felt today. Like, I just think it's the whole thing is just such an incredible. It's just sort of such an incredible piece of writing. Anyway, he walks on stage at the 65 Newport Folk Festival carrying an electric guitar, the way some people carried a gun, nonchalantly but with latent intent, and the world of pop shifted on its axis. Like, it's such a great piece of writing.
That is a great piece of writing. I've actually got a book of collected Sean O'Hagan.
Oh, really?
Dylan, yeah, there is one. I just picked it up at FOP.
Oh, amazing.
It's like £5 at FOP.
Oh, that's great.
But what's interesting to me listening to that is that he's often really tough on Dylan. I've read articles in this sort of collected. It's not just Sean O'Hagan. There's other people, but Sean O'Hagan edited it and wrote an article on every album and indeed some of these songs. So some of them are absolutely scathing, like bitterly scathing and angry at Dylan.
Yeah.
So to hear that is he doesn't write it lightly.
No, he doesn't write. Yeah. It was who was the review? Who was the Dylan? One of the reviewers who loved Dylan. I think when he played one of the '80s albums, or maybe it was Self Portrait. It was What Is This Shit?
What is
this shit?
Yeah. Grail Marcus.
Yeah, Grail Marcus.
Grail
It's Grail
Marcus.
Marcus.
About that.
What is this shit?
We did a whole bonus episode called What Is
What
This
is this
Shit?
shit?
Yeah. But so
Because we're all hard on Bob Dylan, aren't we?
I mean, angry at Bob. I get so just at stuff just the decisions of what tracks to put on certain albums. Like I think Infidels could have possibly been one of his best albums with the right song selection.
You leave Blind Willie McTell off Infidels.
How do you?
That's bananas.
I know,
but it's all part of being Bob Dylan, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because he is bananas.
you just don't know what he's going to do, which is keeps you on your toes. Like we're going to see him in November. I've got no fucking idea. Will he go back to playing the whole of Rough and Rowdy when he's just
They're
been
still calling it the Rough and Rowdy race.
Yeah. I saw that tour last year at the Albert Hall.
Me too.
And it was at the end of the gig, I said to my friend Gabriel, who I went with, who was sort of similarly, Gabriel is like my Bob Dylan accomplice. Like he's the person who's obsessed with him, as obsessed with him as me. And so he's the person I will always ask first, and vice versa, if there's like anything Dylan related. So we went to see Complete Unknown together, and like so at the end of the gig, we went to the pub, and I was like, do you think when he stands on stage at the Albert Hall and looks out of that room, he's thinking about the concert at the end of Don't Look Back? And Gabriel went, no.
Nope.
No, absolutely. I would have said the same thing. No fucking way.
No
fucking way.
This is something I wanted to ask you, Nish, because we're different ages, but you're closest to my age, and I've always feel as a young...
that's a real burn on Kerry.
Yeah, sorry. Well,
It's part of our USP.
He's my only companion. This is the thing. I grew up without any sort of fellow Bob Dylan fans of my age. And did you... Yeah. I've always said I kind of sometimes feel like I'm defending Bob Dylan to my friends. It's like Dan's the silly idiot that likes Bob Dylan. Did you ever find that? Like you say, you've got one companion, but like...
I had friends at school who were at least sympathetic enough to Dylan that they came to see him. Kerry and I have discussed this before, but the first gig I went to see was Bob Dylan when I was 16 in 2002 when he was touring Love and Theft.
Better than mine. Mine was Busted. It's not quite got the same. I'm 7.
The thing is, that is more normal. Yes, I was at a party yesterday and somebody was talking to me about Bob Dylan, and I was like, yeah, because when my first gig was Bob Dylan, and he went, so you mean the first time you saw Bob Dylan? I said, no, the first gig I went to was Bob Dylan. And he said, when was it? And I was like, 2002. And the guy I was talking to was like, how old were you? And I was like, 16. And he was like, what the fuck is that? Like he was sort of confused and outraged. I got into Dylan via Hendrix, so I got Electric Ladyland.
Oh,
and then
interesting.
And I was obsessed with Electric Ladyland and all the Hendrix albums, and then All Along the Watchtower is on there. So you think, okay, well, I sort of know who Bob Dylan is because we used to, this is true, sing Blowing in the Wind like it was a hymn at school. Like you would sing Blowing in the Wind like that. That was the kind of thing that people did at primary school in like the 80s and 90s. And so
you were taught it?
It was like you would. There was like some day in assemblies.
Yeah.
Oh right.
Like it was literally like it's like one of those songs. Like it's like it's. So I think. So I was sort of like, I think I know who Bob Dylan is, and he's the folk singing guy. All on the This does not sound like folk music. I'll say that for All on the Watchtower. And so I said to my friend Andy, can I? Because his dad had a massive CD collection. I was like, I'm thinking of buying some Dylan, and he was like, okay, let me give you the greatest hits. So he gave me the 67 greatest hits. And if somebody I think when you're 14, 15, 16, if you're a certain type of person who has a part of your brain that is looking for something to be obsessed with. This is not true of every teenager, but certainly a certain type of teenager.
You're looking for an identity, aren't you, in a certain sense?
I think you are looking for identity, but it's more than that. There are teenagers who who like fixations, who are hyperfixed. I'm probably describing neurodivergent, but I do think there is a type of person that wants to be obsessed with something, and you're primed and ready. And then I just believe you don't get to choose the thing that is going to activate your brain, and when I listened to the 67 Greatest Hits, which literally is Blowing in the Wind, Don't Think Twice, Girl from the North Country, Times They Are Changing, and then, going into Subterranean Homesick Blues, Baby Blue, Rolling
Trinity.
Stone, the Holy Trinity, going all the way up to Rainy Day Woman and I Want You. If you're like, it just completely activates your brain. Like the stuff on that album, it just went right through me. Like I could not believe that somebody had written those songs because it felt like it felt like it was all written for me. That's the kind of thing with when you're that age, there will be moments in your life where something happens. And the nice thing for me is as I get older, I realise that I haven't grown out of that. Like when To Pimp a Butterfly came out, I remember having the same feeling. The excitement I felt was the exact same like energy of, oh my God, this is like listening to Dylan. Like I went in the last 2 years, I have seen Big Thief twice and Adrian Lenker, the lead singer of Big Thief, also twice, like in the last 2 years. Like, so the nice thing for me is that part of my body, that part of my personality, that the obsessive, collector has not gone away. But definitely the Dylan thing, it just was like, it completely turned me upside down. And I think people thought it was strange, but also my friends Andy and Ollie were also listening. They weren't Dylan fans, but they were listening to like Andy was like giving me like Nina Simone albums, and Ollie loved all the early 70s Stevie Wonder albums. And so we were like a gang that would like talk about old music, and we were all into the Beatles, and we were all into the Stones and the Velvet Underground and this kind of stuff. So like I was always in a gang. And then you, as you get older, it suddenly becomes this thing where people are like, oh, that's cool that you liked Bob Dylan. Like, that's actually really cool that you, when you were a teenager.
I still haven't found that yet. My friends still think I'm weird.
But
I found my tribe with Kerry and Robin.
But people actually stop listening to music they get to a certain age.
Yeah.
Usually, I think sometimes that has to do with having kids. I think quite often it does. And then they just stop.
Yeah.
And then, they might know the latest Elton John. Know nothing against Elton John, but that's what they might know. Or they would know all the mainstream stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And they wouldn't continue to dig deep. And then there are the Dylan fans who stopped listening to Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And they go, like, I remember when we had Is It Rolling Bob, the previous podcast, one of the guests, we made the mistake. She said, oh, I love Bob Dylan. And so, would you want to come on the podcast? And she was a fairly well-known actress. She said, yeah, great. We thought, great, terrific. But she'd sort of stopped at a certain point,
right,
and we neglected to ask. So we'd say, well, what do you make of, and I think... Telltale Signs had just come out. We said, so what about Telltale Signs? I think it's his best bootleg series album.
Yeah.
And she was like, I don't know.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But people, people just, a lot of people, most people probably stop. I know people who just for some reason have stopped buying Bob Dylan, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And that means they know everything up to 20 years ago. But I always think, why would you stop with Bob Dylan?
There's no end to digging with Bob Dylan.
And also, you never know. You don't know when. It might never make another album that people love as much as all the other albums. But at the same time, Rough and Rowdy Ways had some great stuff on it. There's some great stuff
Even
on
his
that.
shittiest shit stuff. I remember, I haven't listened very much to Down in the Groove.
Yeah, right.
But
not downloaded and Down in the Groove.
But still, it's worth kind of
Under
digging.
the Red Sky for me.
Oh, really? I think Under the Red Sky's got some great stuff.
This is what's good about Dylan is that Gabriel always says he's a huge apologist for what he calls shit Dylan.
Oh, I'm a huge apologist for
I
I
love shit Dylan.
I feel like I'm the worst Dylan sycophant. Just Dylan apology.
No, we did our very first, we've got bonus episodes of this podcast, and our very first one, I can't remember what you chose, but we both remember that I chose Wiggle Wiggle.
Wiggle was the first.
And I did a deep dive into Wiggle Wiggle, and I actually think it might be one of my top 10 Dylan songs, just because it's so ridiculous. It makes me smile. It
Which
makes
is
me
the
laugh.
one that's on the Royal Tenenbaum soundtrack?
Oh, I
There's
don't
an
know.
instrumental, I think it's from
know.
Self-Portrait, that's on the Royal Tenenbaum soundtrack as well. But yeah,
What, Wigwam?
yeah, it's Wigwam. I think it's Wigwam is on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great. It's a
Yeah.
great little, tune.
But there's all because I hadn't watched the Royal Tenenbaums. Actually, that's not true. I'd watched it quite recently, but I watched the Royal Tenenbaums again recently, and there's just that bit where you just hear him go da 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 da, and you're like, oh fuck, that's fucking Dylan.
Self-portrait. Yeah.
I think he was so. I really actually love him. We all do. But my wife, said to me, she said to me a couple of times, like, what's going to happen when he dies? I mean, she was really worried for me. And I said, well, I'll stay at home all day and weep probably and
wear
listen,
black for a month.
and listen to Bob Dylan all day. But at least I don't want to be in the position where you think, I should have done this.
This is the exact conversation I was having yesterday with someone, and he was saying, I got to go and see him. And I was like, yeah, you got to see him. He'd never seen him. He was like, he's like, he must be in his 50s. And he was like, I love Dylan, but by the time I started loving Dylan, everyone was like, don't bother going and seeing him. And I was like, no, what you're seeing when you go and see Bob Dylan now is what he's always wanted to be, which is a crazy old blues man. That's what he's wanted to be. That's who he
Rambling
modeled
around
himself
the world,
on. Traveling around and
Absolutely.
And that's who he always wanted to be, and that's who he always was. It just kind of got bigger than that.
Yeah.
But that's how he sees himself. And I've only seen him 3 times, partly because I didn't go back and see him because the gig in 2002 was such a precious and special memory for me. In some ways, I was
Great
like,
time to see him.
Yeah,
That
it was
band
that
with Larry
band was
Campbell and stuff.
That
Oof.
band was shit hot. They played on the record as well. So like it was really, they were so good. And I just thought, maybe I never need to see him again. And then when he started doing the Palladium, so he's not doing it this time. I think he's just doing.
He's not doing London.
He's not doing London, yeah. But when he does London, he will often do a run of shows. He did them at the Brixton Academy once that I couldn't go to. Then when he did a run of Palladium shows, and I thought, God, I should have seen Dylan at the Palladium. So then I went back and saw him at the Palladium. And then when he announced the Albert Hall, I was sort of like, I have to go and see him I have to see Dylan at the Albert Hall. And so, but the Palladium gig was the best gig I went to.
Was that because my first Dylan gig was the Palladium during his Sinatra phase? Was it 2017 you went?
I didn't go. So I've seen Rough and Rowdy Ways twice.
Yeah, me too.
So
yeah.
those are the 2 times I've been.
Oh,
So
cool.
I didn't.
Yeah. Oh,
so
that
when he
way,
did
yeah.
the Palladium run of the kind of Sinatra albums, I did think, it would be good to see him in the play because you see, like my girlfriend came with me, and she's like, she likes his songs. She's not a huge fan of his recordings of his songs sometimes, but it was a really weird thing because you're like this. You're like looking at a piece of living history. Like this is the opening act for the March for Jobs on Washington. Like this is Martin Luther King's opening act.
Yeah,
standing in front of you. Like it's so there's a part of you that's like, oh, this is like there's something like incredibly potent about just seeing a person like that in the flesh. And at the Palladium, you do see him. You're not looking at a screen. You're looking at him.
I was and I'll always remember this. So the last gig I went to see was at the Royal Albert Hall on the last tour when he was here. And I was so you've got the stage there, and I was sort of behind the stage, sort of up to the right.
Yeah.
And there was just something about seeing him from that angle where he's behind the piano. I was like,
yeah.
One, that's Bob Dylan. It's a piece of history. But also there was just one moment where he turned to us behind. He's like, oh, they're not getting it. And just went.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I'll remember that forever. I'll never forget that.
Amy just kept saying he was like there was something vaudevillian about. I mean, he loved vaudeville and stuff, but there was something because he would stand in front of the piano with like one hand on his hip,
he does that.
just like sort of. But there's
His
something
curtain
goofy
call
about
is
it.
so
There's something like kind of goofy about it, but also there's this side of him that's like a museum piece, but also he is still doing new things. Like this is not like I've seen a lot of these heritage acts and I've had a wonderful time at their shows, but a lot of them are trying to do a version of what they've always done. He's still moving forward.
Absolutely.
He's still
Have you seen that thing on? I saw on YouTube where he a concert last year where he had there was like a plastic fork on the and he starts just doing a little percussion with the water glass that's on the piano.
He's out of his fucking mind.
He's out of his
What he's doing now is not trying to imitate what he did in 1966 or 1965. He is trying to do something new, and he's acting his age, and that is really interesting. Like, it is exciting to go and see the Stones because Mick Jagger is still kind of like, he's kind of an incredible physical specimen, and he's still kind of doing the things that he did, but he's still kind of doing the things that he did 50 years ago. Dylan is an 8-year-old. He is in his 80s, and he is behaving on stage like he's in his 80s. And there is something really interesting and exciting. And also, if you know anything about Bob Dylan, he's never going to give you the thing you want or expect from him. And the real fans know you're not going to get what you expect.
One of the funniest Dylan concert experience I had, it was the second time I saw him at Hyde Park with Neil Young was on first.
Right,
And Dylan is not right for Hyde Park, he said, but it was so funny. There were a couple of people near me holding up Shazam. I was just like, you just leave now because this isn't going to be for you. It was really early in the set.
You've got to sort of... You've got to... There's nothing in his career that suggests he's going to do what you expect of him. And that's kind of the fun of it, right? That's sort of that's the fun of him. That's the fun of being a Dylan fan. It's like, he's always doing something weird. No one thought he'd convert to Christianity. No one thought he'd suddenly do an album of... like standards. Like, nobody thought he would suddenly be doing
three albums of standards.
Including a triple album.
Nobody thought he was going to do that. Nobody thought he was going to write a 16-minute song about the assassination of JFK in 2020.
And it'd be his first UK number one, which I think is the funniest statistic.
It's this sort of... It's a fascinating thing. He is you want him to be weird. Like, that's what you want. You don't want
absolutely.
To show
when
up.
people get angry, like we did an episode on the Martin Scorsese Rolling Thunder Netflix thing. We just did a bonus episode on that. And I did my research on it. And when they showed it in New York to a bunch of, famous people, they, rented a screening room and everything. When they realized afterwards... a lot of them were really pissed off.
Really?
But clearly not true Bob Dylan fans.
And also like that, it's so funny. Sharon Stone in that.
Oh, it's
Sharon
hilarious.
Stone in that is incredible because it's an incredible performance because it's all lies. She never met Dylan at that time. It was all faked. And, the performance artist, the German
Stefan Van Gogh.
it was like, I never rated Dylan as an artist. Like, all that stuff is like...
How was Dylan? He said, he was fine.
Somebody told me, I spoke to somebody who worked on the crew when they filmed that. Apparently, so Dylan, when he was doing his Talking Heads, was... listen, I don't know if this is true, but apparently Dylan was nervous because Dylan was like, man, is this going to work? Like, apparently that's what he was saying. He was saying, like, I don't know if this is going to come off. Like, it's a weird thing. It's a really... And
he's not known for his good acting.
No, the thing is, Dylan was great in it. Lying, himself. Just lying about Sharon Stone and saying that her boyfriend was in Kiss, and I went to see Kiss, and I sort of thought the makeup was a cool idea. He stole the makeup from Rolling Thunder from Kiss. He's actually, it's the best performance he's ever...
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. I think it's a great movie, and like, I think because obviously the great thing about No Direction Home is that it is what you want from that. It is as authoritative a visual and oral history of the first 25 years of Dylan's life, with testimony and interviews with him and a lot of the key players, and it does genuinely deliver on the promise of the premise. Like, that really is, that's one of the great American artists making a documentary about one of the other great American artists. That's what you want. But then with Rolling Thunder, you're like, let him fuck around. Like, he should fuck around. Like, that's very Dylan. Like, you want him to fuck around.
Well, apparently he did Jeff Rosen came to him with all this footage from Ronaldo and Clara.
It wasn't Scorsese's idea.
And it wasn't Scorsese's idea. And he put together a kind of a No Direction Home version of that. very authentic recreation of the Rolling Thunder. And then Scorsese apparently looked at it and thought, oh no, I've made a terrible mistake. I've made it like a good documentary.
I've
already done that.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's do something else.
Yeah.
So apparently he came up with most of the ideas. One of the guys, because we just watched it again very recently, was the guy, his real name is Jim. Well, it's in there, Jim Giannopoulos.
Yeah.
And he's the money guy, right?
Yeah,
Who said that he was the producer.
Yeah.
He wasn't the producer.
Yeah.
He was in law school at the time.
No, and there's the actor he's playing the same character he plays in that Robert Altman.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
the guy who plays Tanner. Yeah.
Tanner,
yeah. So it's great. But you know what? I realized when I was watching it that it's not for everybody.
Yeah, sure.
Like, because at one point, because I'm continually trying to get my wife to come on board.
Yeah.
And the deeper I've gotten into Bob Dylan, the less she's come on board. And it's a real shame because used to be, like I used to make mixtapes for her, we'd been together for like 30 years, and I put Love -0 No Limit on the mixtape.
Yeah.
And, it was a bunch of sort of love songs on this mixtape.
Yeah.
And I remember her saying to me, that's good.
Yeah.
Who's that? And I said, well, that's Bob Dylan. And that I've had a number of our, moments in the last 30 years like that. But I was watching the Rolling Thunder thing, thinking, we're going to sit down and we're going to watch it together. And she'll turn to me and say, he really is a genius.
Yeah.
But that's not because it's very in the Rolling Thunder thing.
It is. Yeah,
like if you don't know who Bob Dylan is historically, and you're not on board the Bob Dylan
it's very
train,
much a Dylan
you're never going
fan.
to get it.
Yeah. But my girlfriend and I actually owe you a vote of thanks, Kerry.
Oh, brilliant.
Because I did your previous Dylan podcast, Is It Rolling Bob? So I toured America earlier this year, and I went to Tulsa to do a show. And my girlfriend, Amy Annette, is a comedian, and through a classic bit of nepotism, she was my opening act on the tour. I did let her open for me on tour, unlike Bob and Joe.
Bob and Joe.
But did you call her on?
Yeah. So she said, why in the name of God are we going to Tulsa? Because my American agents put the tour together.
I know.
And then
why.
they were like, what? And I was like, when I saw Tulsa on there, my initial thought was, hold on, why are we going to... And then I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go to the Bob Dylan Centre.
Yeah.
And so... if people are not, everyone listening to this podcast is going to know that Bob Dylan's personal effects, he has kind of donated them to a museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's some
local millionaire
who bought all of Woody Guthrie's papers and opened a Woody Guthrie Centre. And then apparently Jeff Rosen said to Dylan, you've got a lot of stuff that's going to degrade unless it's properly archived. And so then he approached the Woody Guthrie guy and said, would you be interested in Bob Dylan's effects? So the guy was like, yes, I'll buy another warehouse. And so it's in Tulsa. But I had messed up the days because it's not open to the public on Monday and Tuesday. So I realised this and I was absolutely devastated. Then the week before, I was doing an event with Jordan Klepper, who's a brilliant comedian and is on The Daily Show in New York. And so we were supposed to do an event where we discussed doing political comedy in the UK and the US at this particular moment in history. And I'd never met Jordan before. We have mutual friends, but we'd never met before. And he walks into the dressing room and he immediately says... we have got to talk about politics and comedy on stage, but all I want to talk to you about is Bob Dylan because he had listened to the Is It Rolling Bob episode that I did, and Klepper's a huge Dylan fan, and so then he said something about Tulsa, and then I had to basically say to him, do you know the Bob Dylan Centre people and will they let me in to have a look around? And he said, yeah, 100% I can. So I owe you big time.
Brilliant.
Because of that, he was, Klepper knew that I was a Dylan fan. And so he put me in touch with the Centre. So the Centre is open for academics to come in. Obviously, I'm not an academic, but they did it as a favour to me, which was really sweet. It's an amazing place. Like this, what they've done with that place is incredible. And I was like, you don't have to come to this. Like, I'm aware that this is not like but she was like, listen, I'm interested enough in this to come and see what it's like. And it is that the Bob Dylan Centre in Tulsa is incredible. And, there's effects there like, his jacket that he wore on stage in Newport, the leather jacket is there. But the thing...
God, it's just finding when the fuck am I going to be in Tulsa?
Also, the thing with it is, the thing that they have is the notebooks. So there's like one notebook and it's a tiny little notebook, and it says on one page is Lenny Bruce's phone number. So it just has Lenny Bruce. Wow. And then on the next page it just says, "Go away from my window." And you're like, oh my God. Like, that's the idea. But the two things it has, I think it's a Montreal Hilton headed piece of paper, and it's got Chimes of Freedom on it. And it's just handwritten Chimes of Freedom. And you can see him revising the lines as he goes. And then on the other page, and then with the other one, they have the Blood on the Tracks notebooks, and it has Tangled Up in Blue, and he is rewriting it and changing it. There are lyrics for a version of Simple Twist of Fate that none of us have ever heard. Like, they bear nothing, apart from the title, they bear no other resemblance. But Tangled Up in Blue, you can see him, and at the top, on the top of the page, he's written out words that rhyme with blue. And you're like, this is how you write. And it's literally like, I think it's like, you, Jew. Like, it's like literally written out like that, and you're like, what the hell is this? And the thing that I found, and I will say this, and I feel this is the correct place to say this, I started crying when I was because those, like, that stuff has like meant everything to me almost my entire life, and like seeing the indentations and the ink on the page of Tangled Up in Blue, there's nothing like that. There's no, it's so hard to capture that. You're actually seeing the person, like you're seeing the paint stroke, like the brush strokes. And it was just incredible. But also the thing that it made me think was, there's this idea, he sometimes propagates these ideas. Like, I don't know where these songs came from. Like, they came to me in a dream. But when you see it on the page, you realise he's a writer. He's a craftsman. He's a craftsman. Yeah. Like, it's a craft, and he's every word. He's weighing every word, and he's moving words around. And you saw on the page his thought processes and how he was structuring the song. And it was the most unbelievable thing for a Dylan fan. There's nothing like it. It was the looking directly at that, seeing the revisions that he made to the song. It's just so special, and it was a really, really sort of magical experience. And and it was like my partner, even my partner, who is not massively interested, but interested enough, was saying, "This is really cool. Yeah, like, this is cool. The stuff is really interesting." And then there was a certain point where she was like, "I am going to pop to the cafe. I'm going to go have a Dylan burger." Yeah, because she was also like, "I don't want to cut into your time because I feel like..."
Tangled Up in Mood.
Yeah. Yeah,
sorry, it was dreadful.
It was really the Dylan Centre. What they've done. It's not just the fact that they have the stuff, it's like how they've presented it and the specific exhibitions that they were doing. And I think last month they actually were displaying the Bloomfield Telecaster that he played on like Rolling Stone and then played at the Newport Folk Festival. That I think someone has bought for like $250,000.
Yeah, I knew it went on sale.
Yeah.
And when they opened it, I know there was like Patti Smith.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They had a bunch of concerts. Do they actually have a concert venue attached to it?
No, I think they do it in a bit of the museum. There isn't like a specific designated venue, I believe. But it's a massive building, and they've done just such a beautiful job with it. And there's loads of people there. So the day that I was there were people there doing academic research, because now if you're writing a paper on Bob Dylan, or you're writing a thesis on Bob Dylan, you go to Tulsa, and you go and you kind of. And it was the best. Like, it was such a cool, exciting thing to do.
That's the thing I keep trying. Well, I don't try to convert people to Bob Dylan, but occasionally I do find myself in a situation where that's, what have you been up to lately? I got a Bob Dylan I'm hosting a Bob Dylan podcast, blah, blah, why. And then, I will say things about, like, it's like being alive when, Shakespeare, honestly, there's this guy who uses words and music together, and he makes these things that will be remembered for centuries if the world is still around. Yeah. And they give you that look, like you're deranged.
The only thing I say is, if people don't like Bob, like someone I was talking to this guy yesterday. We were talking about Bob Dylan, and the another person there said it just never does done anything for me. And I was like, yeah, I can get that.
I get it. Yeah.
But my thing is, I believe if there isn't a Bob Dylan. There is a Bob Dylan song for everybody. Yeah. And it's almost certainly, if you don't like his voice, not recorded by Bob Dylan. I would say that someone said to me, I don't like a single Bob Dylan song. And I was like, then I believe you are defective as a person. Yeah. Because actually, if you take away his own recordings of it, if you listen, Hendrix's version of All Along the Watchtower, like, you don't like that song. What are you...
Emmylou Harris's of this one, of Every Grain of Sand.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's so many great... Like, I think Nina Simone is one of the great Nina Simone, in her own right, is one of the most significant popular musicians of the 20th century and is an incredible songwriter and performer in her own right. She's also, like, her and Hendrix, I think, tapped into something. Dylan tapped into something with them, and they tapped into something with Dylan. Like her versions of things like "I Shall Be Released," her version of "Just Like a Woman," which
amazing.
Again, that changed. Yeah. "Just Like a Woman" is kind of a nasty, edgy song. Like it's interesting how the dynamic of it changes when it's being sung by a woman. I think when you hear people doing there's cover versions of Dylan that you've got to feel like. Sheila Adams' version, I genuinely put that up there. That Sheila Adams cover of Tight Connection is, I think, up there with the best covers of any Dylan song.
I was just out of drama school when that came out, and I was working at the Noel Coward Theatre front of house, so I saw that every night. And I actually didn't like the show. I love the music, I don't like the show.
Sure.
But I would always tune in 80 shows on for that song. Every single night.
We had Sheila Adams on Is It Rolling Bob early on, and she wasn't a Bob Dylan fan when she started. She became a Bob Dylan fan, but not a Bob Dylan freak what we are. And so I tried to sort of get stuff out of her, but we didn't. She was very pleasant, very professional. But the one thing that I remember from that podcast is her saying on the first day, the cast were all given the A Girl from the North Country mugs,
right?
And there was one that said Bob, and they kept it there the whole time.
That's great.
I believe he did see the show at one point.
He did see it in New York.
I enjoyed it, apparently.
Right, yeah.
I was reading something this week, Nish, that I just thought, it'd be perfect to talk to Nish about this, just because I've always thought about Dylan, like, he's never forayed much since his early days into politics. He doesn't mention stuff, and there's a big we're both Radiohead fans, there's a big talk at the moment around kind of how are people complicit if they're not talking up about certain things. And I was reading Nick Cave's Red Hand Files. I'm a massive Nick Cave fan, and this week was kind of about that, and he put I just thought this was interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts as it pertains to Dylan. I am comfortable with doubt and am constitutionally resistant to moral certainty. I do not believe that silence is violence, complicity, or a lack of courage, but rather that silence is often the preferred option when one does not know what they are talking about or is doubtful or conflicted, which for me is most of the time. I am mainly at ease with not knowing and find this a spiritually and creatively dynamic position. I believe that there are times when it is almost a sacred duty to shut the fuck up. Now, it's not. I'm not saying this pertains to the genocide that's going on in Gaza, but from a Dylan fan's perspective, it often does. This whole talk around should artists come out and say stuff about all these political issues has troubled me somewhat, because I thought, well, Bob Dylan isn't going to, and I wouldn't expect him to, and I don't think it's his duty to either.
No, I mean, he's made very few public utterances about politics since the 60s. I mean, beyond, I don't even know if you classify Reuben Carter as a political issue. I mean, it was more just it was a specific case of racial injustice that he was very moved and animated by. He did endorse Barack Obama.
And then blanked him when he gets his medal.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I didn't know he endorsed Obama.
He sort of said on stage something like, "We've got this guy called Barack Obama, and he's running for president, and I think there's going to." He did say something positive about Obama, but he's broadly stayed out of it. I don't know what people's responsibility is. I'm fascinated by the idea of, because my creative output is so intimately engaged with politics. Like, somebody was saying to me, I was talking about, on stage doing stand-up, talking about Gaza, talking about, you know, I talk about racism and in whatever form, and it's political. And somebody said, are you worried about talking about Palestine on stage? Now, for me, I was trying to explain to them, if I do stand-up comedy about the news, if I don't talk about a genocide, it looks like I haven't read the news. Like it's like it's actually like someone was saying, are you worried, are you concerned, is it something that concerns you? And you're like, no, because can you imagine if I did stand up about, you know, like all the like problems that we're having in like various problems in society, but then I didn't mention this like one thing, it would look like I didn't know what I was doing,
or that you were frightened.
Or that I was frightened about. And it's the same thing with, you know, whenever I go and do shows. When I go and do shows in America, you have to talk about American politics. When I go to European countries, I try and engage in the country's politics. Australia, New Zealand, you know, because it looks like I haven't been paying attention. I don't think it's necessarily the responsibility of every artist to have an opinion about the news. For example, with Nick Cave, there's nothing that would suggest he's never got no history of political. No. I think the thing with Radiohead is it's specific to Radiohead because they have a real history of political engagement. You know, the first Radiohead album I bought was when it came out was Hail to the Thief. You know, when I saw them in 2006. 2006.
Sorry, I was thinking last talk.
We're close generationally, but I'm still much older than you. In 2006, they were getting the crowd to chant "Free Tibet." You know, so I think in that instance, if you have a history of engaging politically, then there is a chance that people will expect you. Then it will look strange if you stop. But with Dylan and with Nick Cave, I'm surprised that Nick Cave is talking about silence. Like, I've never thought of Nick Cave as being somebody I have any sense of their political opinions. Like with Dylan, all we know with Dylan really is that he had at some time a kind of interest in racial justice, and Suze Rotolo, who is often sort of underserved. Like, her impact is often swallowed up by Joan Baez in the mid-60s. But certainly Suze Rotolo was a huge influence on him, and her work with Core and integrating him into that. And, and then Baez in that No Direction No documentary does say, well, in a sense, did he owe us anything else? Because he gave us the songs, like he wrote the songs. And she says, like, he couldn't have written those if he didn't have some feeling for it. And this is a sort of, there's a kind of interesting ruffle to this, because my partner's dad met Dylan in the late 60s when he was, the early 70s, I think, when he was like helping John Lennon and Yoko Ono out with like peace protests. My girlfriend's father was in the late 60s very involved in the like anti-Vietnam War protests, and he met John and Yoko and was helping them as a kind of 18, 19-year-old kid from Long Island. He was like, it was at a radical university in the Bronx, and he got involved in the peace movement. And he said that he met Dylan because Dylan did turn up to one of the protests, which is we can't prove the story, but it does slightly put a ruffle into this.
Well, I remember. Did you see the latest John and Yoko documentary? That film?
No, I haven't seen that yet. Yeah.
Oh well, it's very interesting because there's a lot of stuff between the lines.
Yeah.
And like there's a lot of recorded phone conversations with Alan Klein.
Yeah.
Where Lennon is at his most political.
Yeah. Right,
it's around the elephant's memory.
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah.
And he's talking to. They just show those kind of things with shows the sound waves because they don't add visuals to them. And he says, Alan, we're going to go on tour and we're going to do this tour, and Dylan's interested in coming.
Yeah.
Dylan's interested in coming. It'll be me and Dylan singing political songs.
Yeah.
And Alan, you can hear Alan Klein. You can just hear it in his voice saying, "That's great, money, 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 money." But it didn't never happen, obviously.
But Amy's dad said that he spoke to Dylan at the time, and he at one of these events, and he said that it seemed like Dylan wasn't that interested in politics, but what really animated Dylan was when he started talking to him about, he said, "I'm a Woody Guthrie fan," and then Dylan was like, "Oh my God," and he had like half an hour conversation with Dylan about Woody Guthrie. And I think the thing with Dylan is that he is the original, like this idea that he keeps stuff. Like, we know that Dylan is not that interested in his own legacy. He's certainly not that, like, fixated in preserving his own legacy. And actually, Jeff Rosen has done kind of an amazing job of preserving a lot of this stuff. But I think Dylan has saved all that stuff because Dylan ultimately, at his core, is a music nerd. And I think some of the politics that he expressed is actually more to do with his deep love and admiration of people like Woody Guthrie, Leadbelly, Cisco Houston. Like, I think some of that is actually more to do with his love of the music and the emotional feel of those songs.
Innately political musicians.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And so I wouldn't expect any outpourings about politics from Dylan. But at the same time, one thing we know is you don't. He will always find some way of confounding you. But yeah, I think Dylan is the kind of original music hipster. Like, he was the kid who, you know, on the college campus in Minnesota, like, he could literally recite, he could play you any Woody Guthrie song. He had an encyclopedic, that's the thing they always say about him, he had encyclopedic knowledge of every single Woody Guthrie song. He you know, when he had Theme Time Radio Hour, people were sort of shocked by the breadth of music that he was listening to. When Lanois met him in the 90s to talk about, I think, so they'd done Oh Mercy and they were talking about Time Out of Mind. Daniel Lanois said he was shocked because Dylan was talking to him about Beck and saying, I'm really interested in the tape loop stuff that he's doing on Odelay. And Lanois was like, wait, so Dylan is listening to Beck? And you're like, it's not that, it would not be a surprise to me. You know, in Chronicles, he writes about listening to rap music in the 80s. And you're like, yeah, he is a music nerd, like, at his core. And I think some of the music that animates him is political in nature. And that's where he finds the connection point. But I wouldn't expect him to, like, be at a protest or a rally. And I don't know what people's obligation is. I think some people, I don't know, you know, who knows? We're living in this kind of, you know, we're living in this feverish period, and we keep talking about, you know, how is history going to view people who were inactive in this period? And, you know, are we in the mid 1930s? You know, you feel something coming, right? And in retrospect, do you think that will people who didn't speak out on various issues come to be judged by history? And I don't really know what the answer is to that. It's a thing that I'm wrestling with personally, and it's a thing that I think a lot of us are thinking about. But, like, the only thing that I do know for certain is that, you know, there is a Dylan song to help in any occasion. And obviously, when you look at Donald Trump, you cannot move far away from, they say patriotism is the last refuge to which a scoundrel clings. Steal a little and they'll throw you in jail. Steal a lot and they'll make you a king. And so the only thing that I do know is that there is a Dylan song. He has written words and music that can help carry us through this time and interpret this time. You know, you know, no one who listens to this podcast or is involved in this podcast will not be looking at, you know, the kind of, like, the sort of evolving arms industry and not think of Masters of War, you know, and the military industrial, like, that song was about the military industrial complex, but it feels as relevant as today. And nobody's looking at, like, images of California bursting into flames, flash floods in Bangladesh and Pakistan, and not thinking that, you know, a hard rain's going to fall, means something bad's going to happen. Like, you know, so I don't know what the obligation of people is, and it's a thing that I wrestle with every day. But at the same time, I do know with Dylan, as we try and live through whatever we're about to live through, he has definitely written something that can offer you some comfort, if that is where you derive comfort. If you're a Dylan fan, there will be songs that you are turning to right now to help you kind of, you know, manage this moment. And, you know, something like Chimes of Freedom, you know, flashing for the refugee on the unarmed road of flight, you know, the warrior whose skill is not to fight, you know, those are, like, there are things that we'll turn to. There are things that you turn to when you have, you know, sad, romantic sadness. There are things that you turn to when people die or they're sick that Dylan has written. And there's also things that you turn to in moments of political unrest. And, you know, I sort of end up, whenever I try and think about Dylan and politics, you end up returning to that thing that Baez says in No Direction Home, which is, at the end of the day, he gave us the songs. So we have the songs. So maybe that's enough.
That was Bob Dylan Approximately with Kerry Shale
And Daniel Crespin. Produced by Robin Guise.
and recorded at Lip Sync Post, Soho, London.
For longer bonus episodes, join our Patreon feed.
And if you have a Bobsessive friend, please spread the word.
It ain't quite the end.
We'll just bid farewell till we meet again.